Okay, so now we have uh, the spreadsheet, and it has dense data, so that means we don't have any missing data. And now we're going to go ahead and add some formulas in to give us some numbers that will describe our data further. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on column E, and I'm going to go insert one to the left, okay? And we're going to call this rainfall mean, okay? So we're going to do rainfall mean, and all we're going to do here is we're going to go to the first row, and so we're going to do the average, right, which is the mean, and we're going to get insert function average, okay? And notice that you can do individual. So let's say, for example, I wanted to do the average of 0 and 100. Okay. So notice that we could average two numbers, right? So if I hit enter, that's going to give me 50. Okay. So that makes sense, right? If I average those two numbers. Let's say I wanted to average more numbers. Let's say I want to average 50. I want to average 75, 25. Okay. Obviously, those are all going to come out to 50, right? But notice that my formula, when I click into this, okay, so notice that it's 50, right? So when I'm putting in a formula, I can either type it directly into this line up here. So notice when I click into the cell, I can edit what's in the cell in this area right here, right next to this function, right, f of x. So in the syntax is we have equals, we have the formula name, which in this case is average, okay, and then we have parentheses, and inside parentheses we have the parameters that we're feeding into that formula, right? So in this case, the parameters are a list of numbers, or we can do a range, okay, which is what I'm going to show you now. So in this case, we actually don't want a list of numbers, right? We want to average. We want to get the average rainfall. So really, we want. And notice what I do here. So if I put my if I click between the parentheses, okay. So I can type this in, right? I could just type an average. In this case, I've inserted this, so it actually just puts my cursor right between the two parentheses there. Okay, once it's between the two parentheses, now what I can do is I can actually highlight the range. So notice that see what it says there? So when I highlight C2, so notice that that's the name of the cell, right? It's in column C, row 2. So we have C2, and then colon, and then D2. Okay, so it means the range from C2 to D2. Now if I want to do further, right, if I want to do C2 over to G2, like that, I could just highlight like that. Now I can either do it graphically or I can just type it in. And depending on what you're doing, it might, sometimes it's easier to type in. Oops. Or I can just click out there. So anyway, so once we click in, I can delete it, and then I can go ahead and highlight. That's usually the easiest way. And then to make this final, I actually hit the enter button. Okay, so if I click out, notice the problem if I click out, right? Because it's going to it won't let me, it just starts to use whatever cell I click in the formula, right? So once I get that range in there, I have to hit the enter button to make it final. Okay, next thing. So I have this initial, formula. It says average C2 colon D2. So I'm averaging C2 and D2 together, and I get 208. So 327 average with 89 is 208. So now what I can do is I click into that cell, and now I'm just going to populate all the other cells in this column. Now, most of the time this works, sometimes it doesn't, so you have to be kind of careful with it. But notice that when I go to this little box on the edge of the cell, this little square at the bottom right corner of the cell, I click on that and I can pull it down. And let's see what happens here. So let's just do the first two. Okay, so notice that in this cell, we have average of C2 and D2. Okay? In the next cell, it's automatically written C3 and D3, right? Which is exactly what we want. In the next cell, if I double click there, it opens up the formula and I click in. Notice that it shows me exactly what's being averaged. You see this little yellow box around here? It's showing me the range that's being averaged, right? Okay, and that's exactly what I want. So once I've kind of tested it there, what I can do is then I can just drag it down. And I can just double check. I can basically notice that I'm arrowing through, so I'm actually clicking the down arrow, and I'm watching this function window right here. So as an arrow down through, I can double check that each of those matches, and in fact it does. It's going to work just fine. So I can grab this last one. I can just drag it down. See, I grabbed that little square at the bottom right hand corner, and I'm dragging it down. And there we go. Okay, so I have mean rainfall in that column. Okay. Now let's go ahead and add mean life expectancy. Okay. In this case, again, let's just go ahead and type it in this time. Sometimes it's quicker to type on these simple ones. It's under insert function average. It's probably quicker to click it. Let's go ahead and just practice typing it. So in these case, it's equals. Whoops. I actually went into a data view. Okay, so we're going to click in this H2 here. I'm going to click equals, and then the formula names are actually in all capitals. Okay, so it's capital AV or ERAGE, and notice it kind of selects up here. If I start to type, Google Sheets is pretty cool. So if I start to type it, notice that it starts to give me a suggestion. So it gives me average. It lets me make the selection. So in this case, right, I want to just do F2 and G2. So I go F2 colon G2, close my parentheses and hit enter. Okay, and that gives me my formula. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and drag that little square all the way down to the bottom. Okay. And there we have it. So that's rainfall mean and life mean, right? Okay, so there I have my two means. Mean for those 2 years. Okay, and I went ahead, I can click on a column, and then once I have the hand cursor, I can just drag that over. Now notice that I'm getting a lot of decimal places here. That can be really, it can be difficult. It doesn't add a lot to our understanding of the data. We need to keep it there for accuracy, right? But we can go ahead and click well, we'll come back to this actually. It's under formatting, but we'll come back to it. Okay, so all right, so we have our means. Now we can also go ahead and find the means of the columns, right? So if we go down all the way to the bottom, now we have our total data, right, which isn't really going to change. We can add a mean record at the bottom, right? So what we can do, interestingly enough, if we're going to be adding stuff into the sheet, so let's say that let's say we're going to be adding records at the bottom of the sheet, and this can happen in a lot of different ways. Could be programmatically, could be something else. I tend to like to add things at the top of the sheet, and I'll show you why. So what we can do is we can put in a mean row, right? And then basically we can go ahead and put in the same thing. We can say average, right? We can go insert function average, okay? And then we can go from C2 colon C. Oops, wasn't C star. It's just C. Okay, so I actually made the mistake of referring to the same cell that I was in. So notice I'm in cell C2, so I can't obviously average the cell in the formula. So that's a circular reference, right? So if I'm trying to average, I can't say, okay, average the cell that I'm in, right? Because they're trying to feed the average back into the average, right? So, okay, so basically we start at C3, and then we're going to average the entire row. So it's 3C colon C, okay? And then we can do the same thing across rows or across columns. We actually take that little square and pull it right across. Okay. Now we can do a couple other things, right? So we can go insert one above. And notice when we do this, let's say we do insert one above the mean. Notice what happens to the cell. So remember I put in C3. Notice that now when we insert a cell above it, it goes down to C4. Okay? So that's important to know, right? Now we're going to go in and we're going to put, we're going to do the max. Okay, so what's the max, right? So we're going to insert another function, and we're going to put in max. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. So this time we're in C4, right? Okay, so we're going to C4 colon, and then just the row, the column name, which is C, which means everything in the column, right? Okay. Then we're going to pull that one across to get all the maxes. Okay, then we're also going to insert one above. We're going to put in the minimum. Okay, so we're going to go insert, function, minimum. Okay. In this case it was C5 colon C. Okay, there we have it. So, we can have a lot of different descriptions here. So max, min, max, mean, and then we're also going to do standard deviation. So insert one row above, and we're going to go equals. And basically, you can kind of guess. So ST is standard deviation, right? And we wanted to again do C6 this time, right? Because I'm down, my initial value here is C6 colon C, and enter. Okay. Okay, so we have our standard deviations. Okay, so so those are kind of our rows there, are our descriptive numbers. Okay. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to calculate a couple of other descriptive numbers here. So insert a column. Oops. We're going to go ahead and insert a column to the right. Insert another column to the right. Okay, and this time what we're going to do is we're going to calculate kind of our, we're going to call this life mean minus life. Okay, so then we're going to take our mean of our, actually it's going to be mean minus rain. Oop, and I should have said rain minus mean. And we need another column, which is our life minus mean. Okay. And we're actually going to use our, oops. Okay, and it's going to be weird because we're actually going to use our mean column here. So we're going to use rainfall mean column, life mean column, right? And then we're going to go ahead and use our mean of the mean, right? So we have our mean for 2 years, okay, and we're going to use the mean of that mean for 2 years. Mean of the mean. So we're going to go ahead and start here. So we got so basically what we're going to do is we're going to keep referring to this row here. So we have the mean column, right? Or sorry, the mean row, and our rainfall mean. That's our average of 2007, 2012. Okay. So basically, what we want to do is we want to do G6, right? And in this case, we just put an equal sign, and we put G6 minus, and then we're going to put, and minus is just going to be the mean, which is G5. Okay, so G6 minus G5, and hit enter. Okay, now we can pull down, but notice what happens here. We got to double check. So this is going to do G6 minus G7, so it didn't get the point here. All right, so we do G6 minus G5. Okay, so remember, we always want to refer back to G5, right, regardless of the thing. Now, hopefully, once we do 2 of those, then it will get the point. So let's double check it. Okay, so it didn't get the point yet. And it doesn't seem like it's going to. Okay, so what we need to do here is actually use an absolute reference. Okay, so when we just use G5 in this case, we're using a relative reference. That means that when we copy and paste it, as we're doing when we drag that little square at the bottom of the cell, it's actually changing as we go. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead and put a $ in front of the G. That kind of freezes the column, and a $ in front of the row. That freezes the row. Okay, now what's going to happen when I drag? Notice that G5 stays the same even though the G7 increments, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and we're just going to drag it down. So we're going to go rainfall minus our mean. Okay. All right, and then we're going to go and do kind of the same thing here. Okay, so in this case, we're going to get H6 minus. Now, in this case, we don't want G5, right? We actually want H6, H5, right? So we're going to change this to H5. So H6 minus H5, and now when we increment, okay. All right, so we have our each value, this rainfall, this average rainfall, minus the mean rainfall for each row, and we have the average life expectancy for each row minus the average of all life expectancy for every record. Okay, now we're just going to basically call this A. So we're going to say A is equal to rain minus mean, rain minus rain mean, and B equals life minus mean. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to just do a couple more things. We're just kind of getting these numbers ready, right? So Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're just going to go A times B, right? So I times J. So we're just going to go equals, and in this case we want, and we can just click into the cells, use an asterisk for multiplication. So we get I6 times J6. Okay, the next, whoops. So you got I6 times J6, which is A times B, right? And then we have A squared, so we just want to do equals. And we can just do I6 times I6, enter. Then we want to do B squared, so it goes equals J6 times J6, and enter. Okay, so there we have our, basically we have A times B, we have A, and then usually how you do squared is you do this caret and then squared, right? So A caret squared means that's A squared, right? You could also do A times A or A, A. It's probably more efficient to do the caret though. And then B squared, so B. Okay, so now we have our formulas, right? And these are all relative, so we're just going to do them all at one time, right? We're just going to highlight and drag it on down there. Okay, and it quickly calculates. All right, so we have these kind of statistical numbers, right? So we're getting here, you know, what we're getting to is the correlation, right? So we're going to see how well these two things are correlated, the rainfall mean versus life mean. That's kind of where we're headed. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and add in a sum row, and I waited to do this so that we could look at a complication that has arisen in our sheet here. So remember that when we created this formula here, when we did this, you know, rain minus rain mean, right? So when we wrote this formula, we used an absolute reference, which is always kind of a risky thing to do. Okay, so it made it easier for me to copy and paste this cell, but the fact is, see how it's purple right here? So it's an absolute reference. My problem is that if I were to insert a row now up here, up above row 5, if I were to insert a row above row 5 would get bumped down. It would now be row 6, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So if I insert a row here, okay. Oh, that is good news. Google Sheets is smarter than I am. So let's go ahead and undo that, Control Z. I think they've updated this, so now it does work. Or it just always worked and I didn't know. Okay, so I guess it's not going to be a problem. So we're going to go ahead and just insert a row. So we're going to insert a sum row, and good news, good news, we're fine on the mean there. Okay, so we're actually just going to add a sum row. It really didn't matter anyways. I was just bringing up this subject. So we're going to right click, insert row, and notice that we get a row 6, right? All our references are fine. We're going to call it sum. Okay, we're going to insert, we're essentially just going to sum up each column. So we're going to go to row C, we're going to go insert function and sum. Okay, and we're going to put C7 to the end of column C, and enter. And then we're just going to go ahead and drag this on across. And we're going to get a sum for each, nice sum for each row. Huh, that's interesting. It's saying that when we sum from I7 to I, that it's 0. That seems unlikely. So I 43. Interesting. I don't know if I made a mistake. I'll figure it out later. Okay, so now we got our numbers. Now we're going to just do our correlation calculation. Our last thing, so we're going to insert one to the right. Okay, and essentially what we have is the formula for correlation is this. So it's A times B divided by the square root of A squared times B squared. Okay, so that is essentially the formula, right? And it would look different if I wrote it out on paper. So we have A times B divided by the square root of A squared times B squared. Okay, but that's pretty straightforward to do in our case. Okay, so we just go ahead and write out the formula just as you might expect. Okay, so I put equals. Okay, and then my first part, I can separate things out in parentheses here. Okay, so I can do A times B. So in this case, these are the numbers we're actually looking at. So it might be actually easier just to write it in line down here. Okay, so I'm going to go equals. And my very first thing is I do A times B, which is just this K6, right? So we have A times B. That's divided by. And then we have square root. And then we have square root right here. And then we have A squared B squared. Okay. Okay, remember these are the sums of all the A squares, B squares. Okay, so this is our correlation, right? So it's 0.09 correlation. So is that good? Well, I'll leave it up to you. You can look that up. So because we're going to go ahead in the next video, we're going to graph it to see what that means. Okay, so this is how we add in formulas into a spreadsheet. I hope it was useful for you, and you should have a spreadsheet that looks identical to this at the end of this video, and be much better at adding in formulas into a spreadsheet. Good luck.